Hello, I'm Jack Fink, and welcome to Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas. We focus on the busy week at the Texas Capitol, where lawmakers have been debating lowering property tax bills to importing prescription drugs from Canada to save you and millions of other Texans money. Plus, a state lawmaker from North Texas is under investigation amid allegations of inappropriate conduct with an intern. We begin, though, with the debate over how to lower property tax bills. The Senate and House have two very different methods for doing so, and the Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, said the Senate will not negotiate with the House on the matter.
The math doesn't work.
In his strongest language yet, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick rejected the House's plan to lower property tax bills and insisted it's dead on arrival in the Senate.
Sometimes you just have to know when to fold your cards. And if they send the bill over, we're not doing appraisal caps. Period. End of story.
Hours later, the author of the House bill urged representatives to vote for their plan.
We have an opportunity here to provide the largest tax cut in our state's history, and we should certainly do it.
House Bill 2, approved today, would lower the cap property appraisals can go up each year from 10% now to 5% for all property owners. And that would save property owners on average $542 in 2024 and $733 in 2025, based on a $350,000 home. The Senate plan, previously approved, would increase the homestead exemption for most homeowners to $70,000, saving people on average $756 in 2024 and nearly $800 in 2025, based on a $331,000 home. For people over 65, the Senate plan would increase the homestead exemption to $100,000, saving seniors on average of $1,033 in 2024 and $1,062 in 2025. Today, the chair of the House Democratic Caucus offered a compromise, using the Senate's homestead exemptions and lowering the appraisal cap to 7.5%.
Homestead exemptions do much better for working families, middle-class families.
But the House rejected that compromise and voted overwhelmingly to approve House Bill 2. Afterwards, Speaker Dade Phelan said he's willing to work with the Senate on this and hash out a compromise.
The taxes are too high.
Fort Worth homeowner Dawn Lopez-Leister, who's watched her property taxes increase recently, has a message for lawmakers.
Whoever is in charge of doing this tax negotiation, you need to get to work. You need to quit fighting.
Now to the cost of prescription drugs, something many people have complained about for years. This week, the Texas House approved nearly unanimously a bill to create a program to import certain medications from Canada to save people money.
That would be absolutely amazing.
Kelly Anderson of Dallas hopes a new bill will become law and would save her and other Texans money on their prescription drugs. If ultimately approved, the state of Texas would create a program allowing certain drugs to be imported from Canada, where they cost less. Right now, Anderson says she must spend thousands of dollars on medications to treat her asthma.
So until I meet my out-of-pocket deductible, which is $8,000, until then, I have to pay for everything out of pocket.
It's kind of amazing that
at a news conference at the Texas Capitol, both Democratic and Republican lawmakers wrote and pushed for the bill.
We can help ensure that Texans can afford the prescription drugs they need for themselves and for their families. This bill is about saving lives.
The bill would require the state to work with Canadian suppliers and select the drugs that would save Texans money.
A program like this would have the potential to save Texans money, but it would not be a slam dunk.
Steve Rodriguez, a pharmacist at Doherty's Pharmacy in Dallas, says safety of the drugs is also crucial.
Is this drug safe? Where did it come from? We have what's called a track and trace. It's a pedigree where we know where that drug came from.
The bill requires each drug that's imported from Canada to meet FDA standards and that the FDA would have to approve the state's program. State Representative Brian Harrison of Waxahachie served in the Trump administration, which allowed states to create these programs.
Most API, or active pharmaceutical ingredients, are already imported from abroad. The overwhelming majority, I think close to 80% of it, is already imported. That's the stuff in the pill that is doing the thing that it's supposed to be doing in your body.
Kelly Anderson is hoping for relief soon.
I spent so much money on getting prescriptions and insurance-wise that it would be so amazing to get a wholesale price of all the different medicines I have to take.
As for potential savings, the Texas House did not include any estimates in its analysis of the bill. The Office for the bill's author pointed to other states that have proposed similar programs. Florida, for example, estimates the state agencies could save $150 million. Colorado says patients and employers there could save 65%. In other news, some Republican state lawmakers are calling on one of their own to resign. This after the Texas Tribune reported that Representative Brian Slayton of Royce City is under investigation related to allegations of his actions with an intern. My colleague Andrea Lucia reports.
In Hunt County, people aren't sure what to believe. I hate abuse of power and I hate false accusations. We have one or the other, said County GOP Chair David Hale. The Texas Tribune reports a House committee received a complaint from a staffer accusing Representative Brian Slayton of Royce City with having an inappropriate relationship with an intern. According to the Tribune, the complaint accused Slayton of calling her after 10 at night and inviting her to his Austin condo. The report cited a separate source with saying Slayton drank alcohol with the intern, who is not yet 21. A Hunt County attorney representing Slayton denied the accusations, calling them outrageous claims circulating online. But at least two fellow Republicans are taking them seriously. Representatives Briscoe Cain and Steve Toth, two fellow staunch conservatives, have now both posted online urging Slayton to resign immediately. Court records show Slayton is married with two young children. His campaign website touts him as a Christian conservative who has served as a youth minister in several Texas churches.
A quorum is present.
In a statement, House Speaker Dade Phelan wrote, "The Texas House does not tolerate misconduct or other inappropriate behavior and takes all allegations related to these issues seriously. I expect this matter to be addressed in a swift and thorough manner." In Royce City, Andrea Lucia, CBS News, Texas.
Abortion rights supporters and opponents are waiting to see what happens next in a court battle over the most commonly used abortion pill, mifepristone. The Biden administration has asked the Supreme Court to intervene after the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals decided to allow mifepristone to remain on the market but imposed restrictions on its distribution, preventing patients from receiving the drug through the mail. Earlier this week, we spoke with SMU constitutional law professor Dale Carpenter about this issue. SMU constitutional law professor Dale Carpenter, thank you so much. We appreciate it as always. So as you know, there are these conflicting opinions by two separate federal judges when it comes to the FDA and medication abortion. What do you make of this?
Well, it's highly unusual that you'd have two conflicting opinions on an issue like this in such short order. I think one of them came down just literally half an hour or less after the other one. And we don't see things like this happening very often.
What's going on here, do you think? I mean, because you said this is so unusual.
Well, I think there's a lot of uncertainty and instability in the law now that Roe versus Wade has been overruled. And so I think various parties, especially opponents of abortion, are trying to test the limits of their ability to place restrictions on the practice all around the country.
And so here you have the federal judge in Texas basically taking issue with the FDA's review process, not only back in 2000, but also in 2021 when the agency allowed mifepristone to be distributed through the mail. And then you've got the federal judge in Washington state saying that the FDA's restrictions are too tough. So how does this all get sorted out in the end?
Well, I mean, obviously, these are judges with somewhat different judicial philosophies. On the one hand, in the Texas Judge Kaczmarek, is appointed by President Trump, and I think is a much more conservative judge. And he's less willing to accept the word of the FDA and its review process that these drugs are safe and effective. And then you've got a judge in Washington who was appointed by President Obama who's much more likely to err on the side of giving doctors and patients the ability to make decisions for themselves without too much interference from the federal government. So you've got different judicial philosophies at stake, and I think we have this all around the country now, where judges just come to different conclusions based on those predilections.
And so we know that the Biden administration has filed an appeal to the Texas judge's ruling to the Fifth Circuit, where you once served as a clerk. Do you think this is headed right to the Supreme Court?
Well, I think it can be headed to the Supreme Court in the sense that whichever side does not get its win, at least temporarily, in the Fifth Circuit will probably try to go to the Supreme Court. It's very telling to me that the judge in Texas stayed the effects of his decision until this coming Friday. Well, the Justice Department asked the Fifth Circuit to rule by noon on Thursday. And if they don't get a ruling by noon on Thursday from the Fifth Circuit, that signals to me that they are going to go straight to the U.S. Supreme Court and attempt to get the judge's order stayed in that forum.
My question really is, what are the constitutional questions here? Because after, last year the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, they sent it back to the states. So do the federal courts even have any jurisdiction over this?
Well, that's a very complicated question. There aren't actually really many outstanding constitutional questions involved in this litigation. Really, the issue here is that you have a federal agency regulating, and courts usually defer to the judgment and the expertise of those agencies. When they say that a drug is safe and effective, especially when it's now been on the market for more than 2 decades, that usually stands, and it's highly unusual for a court to take the position that now that decision was erroneous and has to be halted. So I think you've got an issue of federal law, but not necessarily of constitutional law. I think the constitutional law issue about Roe versus Wade is not directly involved in this litigation.
Are there? I'm sorry. Are there?
It's a question of deference to federal agencies that federal judges usually invoke.
Are there separation of power issues here?
There could very well be separation of powers issues if the federal judiciary is now going to second guess and superintend those agency decision-making processes and again, cite their own judgment about medical efficacy and safety. That could raise a question of whether the judges are now intruding themselves into policymaking and the role of the executive branch.
And that would be inappropriate?
That would be a violation of the separation of powers. We have these doctrines so that the executive branch basically executes policy that's formulated by Congress, and the judiciary's role is a very limited role, trying to make sure that the executive branch, the FDA in this case, hasn't acted in an arbitrary and capricious fashion. And it's very hard to say that the decision was arbitrary and capricious because there's really quite a bit of support for the decision that was made by the FDA after more than 20 years ago.
What do you make of some Democratic lawmakers who are calling on the Biden administration to defy the court's ruling if it ends up, where the judge's ruling would stand?
Well, I think those kinds of pronouncements are more political than they are legal. I think they're more a statement of advocacy of women's reproductive freedom than they are legal statements. I expect that the Biden administration will abide by any valid holding that the courts issue. Of course, the Biden administration can take this issue as far as it can, but at the end of the day, I think they'll abide by the law as declared by the federal courts.
And at the end of the day, even if the FDA is ordered to go back and review and all that. I was reading that it could take years, if it ever came to this, for the FDA to pull the drug off the market. I mean, we're not talking about something that could happen anytime soon.
That's right. I think we're in such uncharted territory now. It's hard to even talk about timelines, given that how much the drug is out there. I think there have now been more than 5 million women who have taken these drugs in the past quarter century or so. And I think there are huge questions about whether the plaintiffs who tried to overturn the FDA's decision even have standing in federal court to do so. And I think there are large questions about why it is that they waited so long to bring this litigation.
And would there be statute of limitation issues here?
Yes, very much so. I think that's going to be a big issue going on up and going forward.
And I have two other quick questions for you. Maybe they're quick, I don't know, but quick certainly to ask, and that is legal issues here. Here you have a judge in conservative Texas, a judge in liberal Washington State, and this brings up the question of forum shopping. One side goes to one place where they can get a favorable ruling, another side picks another court where they can get a favorable ruling. Isn't this a problem?
Yes, I think it is a problem. It's increasingly a problem all around the country, and it's a problem that is magnified by the fact that these judges, like the one in Texas, are issuing orders that have nationwide effect, so that this judge in Texas can purport to bind people in New York and California and other places to his ruling. And of course, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. So a judge in another place could bind agency officials in Texas as well. I think these nationwide injunctions are becoming more common and probably more problematic as we go forward, because we have so much disagreement in the courts about what the right way forward is in terms of judicial interpretation.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about these national injunctions, because here basically you're having a single judge casting established law aside based on his or her ruling.
That's right. And I think that's something that the Supreme Court and maybe Congress are going to need to try to start reining in, some of these nationwide injunctions.
All right, SMU constitutional law professor Dale Carpenter, thank you so much. We appreciate your insight as always.
My pleasure.
This week, Governor Greg Abbott created quite the political stir when he tweeted that he's asked the Board of Pardons and Paroles for an expedited review to determine whether an Army sergeant convicted of murder should be pardoned. J.D. Miles spoke with the mother of the victim, who was taking part in a rally against police brutality.
But I do understand that you all have reached a verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant Daniel Perry guilty of the offense of murder as alleged in count 1 of the indictment.
When a Travis County jury found Daniel Perry guilty of murder for the death of 28-year-old Garrett Foster in downtown Austin, Sheila Foster says the relief she felt after her nearly 3-year search for justice.
I got 18 hours of peace to finally breathe.
Didn't last long.
And when this happened on Saturday, it literally buckled me over. I haven't left my house. I didn't do anything on Easter. I'm shaking like a leaf right now. I'm sick to my stomach. I can't eat anything. And it's almost like all of that weight was lifted in that verdict. And now it feels like the biggest hammer in the world has come down crashing on me.
That hammer, according to the murder victim's mother, came in the form of a tweet by Governor Abbott the day after the verdict, which said, "I am working as swiftly as Texas law allows regarding the pardon of Sergeant Perry." The tweet goes on to suggest that the actions of Perry, a Fort Hood Army sergeant, should have been justified as self-defense. Attorney General Ken Paxton posted later that he agreed with the governor. That's despite a jury's unanimous decision that Perry was guilty of murder after hearing from 40 witnesses and deliberating for 15 hours.
I would honestly just ask that anyone anyone, including the governor, if you're trying to take a side in this deal, at least look at the evidence first.
That evidence presented during the 2-week trial showed that both men were legally armed when Perry, who was working as an Uber driver, turned onto a downtown Austin street blocked by a crowd of 20 Black Lives Matter protesters in July 2020. Foster, who had been protesting alongside his girlfriend for 50 straight days, approached Perry's vehicle armed with a rifle. Perry opened fire, claiming Foster raised his weapon, which witnesses denied. Prosecutors presented some of Perry's messages and social media comments in the weeks before, which said, "I might have to kill a few people on my way to work. They are rioting outside my apartment complex. And I might go to Dallas to shoot looters." The victim's mother and her civil attorney find it inappropriate, to say the least, that the two most powerful men in the state would interfere in a murder trial that's still not over.
How worried are you about this influencing the jury during the sentencing phase?
Well, the governor is the most powerful elected official in the state of Texas. Nobody, including the governor of the state of Texas, should shut down the process of the rule of law, and it appears that's what the attempt is here.
But to see the governor and the attorney general take sides on a murder trial, how does that sit with you?
I can't believe it's happening. I feel like Garrett was marching for our equality and for our constitutional rights, our First Amendment rights, and our Second Amendment rights. And it just feels like it's weird because he died fighting for those things.
Sheila Foster will be in the courtroom when the trial resumes tomorrow. Perry faces a sentence of up to life in prison. J.D. Miles, CBS News, Texas.
That's all for Eye on Politics this week. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jack Fink. You're watching CBS News, Texas.